Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Grace McCarron, joined by Kurt Sippel, alongside Tyler Kepner, senior baseball writer for The Athletic. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started talking all things baseball, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be on. So this is the longest running sports talk show in New York, huh?
Yeah,
That's
it's a
pretty cool.
title we like to brag about a little bit.
Yeah. Did Vin Scully host it back in the old days, or
Yes,
that's great.
exactly.
Michael Kay maybe at some point. I don't know. Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, our Kurt, do you want to start us off with the first question, actually?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So you've been covering the Yankees and the Mets for a very long time. And I just wanted to ask, both of these teams coming into the year with very high expectations, both going through big rough patches, which team do you feel like is more poised to make a bigger run at October when their rough patches might end?
Yeah, that's a good question. I I think they're both capable. I've seen plenty of examples in baseball where teams don't look good this time of year and then they figure it out or they get hot. I think maybe the Yankees have a little better shot of that because I feel like the American League is not quite as tough as the National League. And the Yankees pitching, I believe in a little bit more. The Mets bullpen additions haven't been too successful the first month they've been here. And their starters, I don't think have the kind of high end potential that the Yankees have, at least from Fried and Rodon when they're on their game. Um, I mean, the Mets they're good. I mean, David Peterson's good, and I could see a scenario where they do go far. But I think I like the Yankees a little better.
So I wanted to just flip the from baseball right now to your career in sports writing. I wanted to ask you about what was the hardest article that you've had to write personally when you were writing an article about maybe a player or a team, just in general.
Um, hmm, that's a good question. I think being around during the steroid era, I think we all have regrets for not, for recognizing that that was going on, but not really knowing how to get at it. Because if you didn't have names, then it was like reckless to make accusations, obviously. Um, but I think the way to have gone about it was to just sort of present it as an issue of fairness. We didn't need names necessarily, but just as really harping on the question of why there was no testing. Like you look back and it's kind of crazy. Why was there no testing? And they always would just say privacy. But that wasn't a good enough answer because it didn't really promote fair play, and it created a situation where some guys were doing it and others weren't, and some getting ahead and others weren't, and no one was looking. So it was really an unfair kind of landscape for the players, and didn't they kind of just accepted the union's idea that it was privacy. Anyway, I feel like I could have done a better job maybe pushing that issue, or pushing the issue of like how GMs evaluate players when they may or may not be doing this. I think we could have just made it more of a drumbeat, so it was more of an issue that didn't get to the point it did.
So, our next question, alongside reporting, you've written two baseball books, released in 2019 and 2022. How was that experience writing those books? How was that for you? And how is that different from your job as a reporter?
Well, you use a lot of the same skills.
Mhm.
Finding out where people are, and digging and researching and asking good questions, and putting everything together. That's all very similar. I really enjoyed it. It's been really rewarding, just in terms of, I think, the way people look at you, the way people sort of maybe assign you a little more expertise than you had before. and it's just a real, it's a point of pride. It feels even more special in a way as the years go on that I, was able to do those two. I hope to do more someday, but to be able to have those two, to look at is a really good feeling. I remember just being able to go, to just any random page and just sort of look and remember like who I was talking to and when and how that all came together. And it's a big project. You do something on it every single day. Um, even if it's just a little transcription or reading a research or article or doing an interview or something. It's like pretty much every day. But the key is really loving the subject and really wanting to do it. I could not imagine doing it for putting that much effort into something if I wasn't really passionate about the subject. So that was the key, and that made them both work, I think.
On the topic of interviews, which was the hardest athlete that you had to interview for one of your books?
Hmm. I think the one I really wanted to get most was Steve Carlton, but he didn't talk to the media when he played, and he's kind of elusive, hard to get. But I was able to, talk to some people who I knew from way back, who knew him and knew his people, and I sort of impressed upon him that if I was going to write about the history of the slider, I couldn't do it without talking to the guy who threw and one of the best sliders of all time. And I guess that worked, and I was only expecting like 15 minutes, and we talked for almost 40 minutes, and it was terrific. So that was the one that was the one I most wanted to get, and I was able to get it, and also some like I was writing a chapter about in the pitching book about like spitballs and scuff balls and stuff like that. And I thought to Rick Honeycutt, who a longtime pitching coach, who had a nice long career, but early in his career when he was young and dumb, he had a thumbtack in his glove, and the umpires caught him like scratching up the ball, just a real brazen sort of thing. And I felt bad like asking him about something that that had happened so many years ago, but he was fine. It was just part of his story, and he's a happy-go-lucky guy, and he was fine. But sort of things like that, like asking Ron Washington about some of the moves that didn't work out in the end of Game 6 when they could have clinched the World Series. Sometimes necessarily you have to bring up memories that aren't so good, but most of these guys are pros, and they handle it just fine.
A little bit more of a fun question here. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen at a baseball game that you covered?
Oh wow. I man. I remember one time being at Yankee Stadium. I don't know if your dad was there too, but just watching the game, and all of a sudden, a fan jumped out from above and landed on the netting, and he was probably drunk, but he just kind of hung out there in the middle of the netting, and no one really knew what to do. Like, he's nowhere near anybody at that point, so like he's got to climb up the net to get to whoever's going to arrest him, I guess, or take him to the drunk tank. I don't know. So it was so crazy just sitting there for a minute or two, just thinking like, we're all just waiting for this guy now. Like, what can we do? They're not going to get on because it's dangerous. They're not going to get on the screen there with him. For all we know, he could fall through at any minute to some awful fate. So it was just like this guy had to kind of come to his senses and then, crawl up the up the netting, all the while wondering if he would fall through. And then, just to be wrangled in by the cops, it was really weird. It was like someone daring him, like, oh, you think that could support you? No way, yeah. If you jump, I'll give you $5 or, whatever. Like, and all of a sudden the guy comes jumping onto the screen. I don't think it was the first time it happened, but I think it was the first time I'd seen it. So, yeah, that was old Yankee Stadium you'd see a lot of things there.
All right. And our final question, we kind of have to ask everybody this one. What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who wants to have a career in sports or sports journalism?
Wow. I would say to be willing to go anywhere, Obviously to be willing to work long hours and all that. But also just to really pay attention and be genuine in who you are and how you present yourself. And there's so much cliched writing or ways of speaking or types of questions that really serve no purpose. They bore the athletes, they bore the audience, they don't distinguish you. And so just really be mindful of not just using the same kind of tropes just to get by, because you really don't get anywhere doing that. And you get better interviews, you get better material, you get your writing is better, your speaking, whatever, is richer if you just stay away from those like sort of overused, boring kind of conventions. And that combined with sort of a authenticity and a genuine curiosity and a willingness to go anywhere, I think will ultimately push you where you want to go. I mean, you need breaks, you need luck along the way. Everybody does. But you find that those things that I mentioned are rarer than you would maybe think. And so if you can do those things, you stand out, and then you tend to get where you want to go.
Well, thank you so much for joining us once again, Tyler Kepner, senior baseball writer for The Athletic, and we will return with more one-on-one right after a quick break.